Look
The
what we
morning
have
sun
here, a
rose
fancy lady
gently
with her
over the
produce.
rolling
Gonna
prairie
give us a kiss
outside
for
the
that
small
egg, little
frontier
darling?
town of Willow
Just leave me
Creek.
alone.
Don't you dare touch
Golden
her.
light spread
Here.
across the open fields, where a cool breeze carried the scent of wild grass and pine. Birds sang from fence posts while horses grazed quietly near weathered wooden barns. Sarah Collins stood outside her small cabin, tying her faded apron before beginning another long day. She had been a widow for nearly 2 years. Since her husband passed away from illness, every chore rested on her shoulders. She repaired broken fences, tended a small vegetable garden, cared for 2 horses, and kept hope alive despite the loneliness that followed her everywhere. Most people in town respected Sarah for her kindness, but a few cruel men saw only weakness. Led by the greedy ranch hand Wade Turner, they believed the widow's land would soon belong to whoever frightened her into selling it. One afternoon, Sarah rode into town with fresh eggs and vegetables to trade at the general store. The dusty streets bustled with wagons, children laughing, and ranchers leading horses. Yet the cheerful sounds faded when Wade stepped into her path. "You still think you can manage that ranch alone?" he asked with a smug grin. Sarah lifted her chin. "My husband built this home with honest hands. I'm not leaving." Wade laughed. "You'll change your mind soon enough." The men beside him chuckled as they walked away. Sarah tried not to show fear, but her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her supplies.
Watch where you're going, lady.
Across the
That's a mighty
street,
fine
sitting
skirt you got
quietly
there.
beneath the porch of the old hotel, a lone traveler watched everything. His clothes were dusty from many miles on horseback. A worn leather hat shaded calm gray eyes. A revolver rested at his side, untouched. No one seemed to know his name, and he never offered one. He simply observed. When Sarah's basket slipped from her hands, apples rolled into the dusty road. Before anyone else moved, the stranger knelt and gathered every apple without saying a word. He handed her the basket. "Thank you," Sarah said softly. He simply tipped his hat. The
Almost done,
following
ma'am.
morning
Thank you, I
began with
couldn't have
soft
managed
sunlight
alone.
shining across
Here, take a
Sarah's
sip.
ranch.
Thank you.
Right away.
Dew sparkled on the tall grass as chickens wandered freely around the yard. Sarah worked alone repairing a broken section of fence damaged by last week's storm. As she struggled to lift a heavy wooden post, another pair of hands quietly steadied it. She turned. The mysterious traveler stood beside her. "I saw the fence leaning," he said calmly. "Thought it might use another pair of hands." His voice was steady, gentle, and surprisingly warm. Sarah smiled. "I don't even know your name." He paused for a moment. "I've gone a long time without using it." She looked puzzled but chose not to ask more. "Then thank you, whoever you are." Together they worked through the morning without many words. The stranger handled each task with quiet skill. He repaired broken rails, calmed a frightened horse, and even sharpened old tools before placing them neatly back where Sarah kept them. By noon, Sarah prepared a simple meal of fresh bread, beans, and coffee beneath the shade of a large oak tree. "You've helped enough," she said. "I don't mind working for a meal." She smiled. "You've already earned much more than that." As they ate, Sarah finally spoke about her past. "My husband dreamed this ranch would become a place where travelers always found kindness." The stranger looked toward the distant hills. "Sounds like a good dream. What about yours?" He remained silent for several moments. "I stopped making plans a long time ago." Sarah noticed the quiet sadness behind his eyes but respected his silence. Late that afternoon, trouble arrived. Wade Turner
Fence is
and
looking
3
sturdy.
rough
It's been a
riders
long
entered the
time since I
ranch
felt
without
safe.
permission.
Just need this rail.
Thank
Their
you.
horses kicked
No need
up
to thank
clouds
me.
of
Stay
dust
put.
as they
What do you
circled
want?
Sarah's
Right
cabin.
away.
"You've had enough time," Wade shouted. "Sell the ranch." Sarah stepped forward, standing as bravely as she could. "I'm staying." The men laughed. The stranger quietly rose from the fence where he had been working. He didn't touch his revolver. He simply stood beside Sarah. His calm expression never changed. Wade studied him carefully. "You planning to interfere?" The nameless traveler answered with only a few quiet words. I'm planning to make sure no one forgets what decent men look like. Silence settled over the ranch. Even the wind seemed to stop. For the first time, Wade looked uncertain. Without another word, he turned his horse and rode away with his men. Sarah let out the breath she had been holding. You didn't even reach for your gun, she whispered. The stranger smiled faintly. The best fight is the one that never begins. As the evening sun painted the prairie gold, Sarah realized something had changed. For the first time since losing her husband, she no longer felt completely alone. Yet neither of them knew that Wade had already begun planning something far more dangerous. Several peaceful days passed over Sarah Collins' ranch.
Taken by the fever.
The mornings were filled with birdsong, the afternoons with honest work, and the evenings with quiet conversations beside a glowing campfire. Although the mysterious traveler never stayed inside the cabin, he pitched his small bedroll beneath an old cottonwood tree near the barn. The townspeople slowly grew accustomed to seeing the Nameless Gunslinger riding beside Sarah whenever she visited Willow Creek. He never spoke much, but he greeted everyone with respect. Soon, even the blacksmith and the storekeeper began tipping their hats whenever he passed. One cool evening, Sarah carried 2 tin cups of coffee to the campfire. I thought you might like some. He accepted the cup with a grateful nod. Thank you. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly while horses grazed nearby beneath a sky filled with stars. Finally Sarah smiled gently. I still don't know what to call you. The traveler stared into the flames. My name doesn't matter much anymore. It matters to me. He hesitated before quietly answering. My mother called me Daniel. Sarah repeated the name with a warm smile. Daniel. It seemed to be the first time in many years that someone had spoken it with kindness. After a long silence, Daniel finally shared part of his story. I once had a wife, and a little daughter. Sarah looked at him with quiet sympathy. What happened?
I lost my wife and daughter years ago.
They were taken by sickness while I was away driving cattle.
I never thought I'd find comfort
His
again.
voice remained calm, but the
together.
sadness in his eyes said everything. I kept writing after that. Trying to outrun the pain. Daniel nodded slowly. But it always rode beside me. Sarah gently reached across the small space between them and rested her hand over his. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. Daniel looked at her in surprise. It had been years since anyone had offered him comfort instead of fear. Their hands remained together for only a few moments, yet it felt like the beginning of something neither expected. Far beyond the ranch fence, hidden among the trees, Wade Turner watched them. His face darkened. If that drifter thinks he can ruin my plans, he muttered, he's made a terrible. 2 nights later, heavy clouds rolled across the mountains.
They picked the wrong
Cold
ranch.
wind swept over the
Why are you
prairie,
helping me?
bending the
Because you're
tall
worth
grass as
protecting.
thunder echoed through the valley. Sarah hurried outside to secure the horses before the storm arrived. Daniel was already leading the frightened animals toward the stable. We need to move quickly, he said. Rain began falling in thick silver sheets. Together they fastened doors, covered hay with heavy canvas, and carried firewood inside the cabin. Just as the last horse entered the stable, lightning flashed across the sky. A loud crack echoed from the far side of the ranch. The north fence, Sarah cried. Without hesitation, Daniel grabbed a lantern. I'll check it. I'm coming. You'll only slow me down in this weather. Sarah frowned. I've worked this ranch long enough to keep up. For the first time, Daniel laughed softly. I believe you. Together they rode through the pouring rain. When they reached the damaged fence, they discovered it hadn't been broken by the storm. Several rails had been chopped apart with an axe. Fresh hoofprints covered the muddy ground. Daniel knelt beside them. This wasn't an accident. Sarah's heart sank. Wade. Before they could repair the damage, frightened cattle began escaping into the darkness. For nearly 2 hours they worked side by side, guiding every frightened animal back through the gate despite the rain soaking their clothes. Exhausted, they finally returned home shortly before dawn. As Sarah wrapped a warm blanket around her shoulders, Daniel quietly examined the broken fence rails someone had left behind. Carved into the wood were 3 rough words. Sell.
They picked the wrong
Or
ranch.
Leave. Sarah's hands trembled.
Why are you helping me?
They'll never
Because you're
stop.
worth protecting.
Daniel folded the piece of wood and tossed it into the fire. They picked the wrong ranch. She looked at him. You don't even know me. He smiled gently. I know enough. And what's that? I know you're worth protecting. For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The first rays of sunrise broke through the clouds, filling the valley with soft golden light. Sarah realized she no longer saw Daniel as a stranger. She trusted him completely. Daniel, however, knew Wade would soon return, and next time, peaceful words alone might not be enough. Far away on the ridge, Wade and his riders watched the ranch through the morning mist. Their cruel plan had only just begun. The morning after the storm arrived calm and bright, but an uneasy silence rested over Sarah's ranch. Daniel repaired the last section of fence while Sarah gathered eggs from the chicken coop. Neither of them mentioned Wade Turner, yet both knew he would return. Near midday, a cloud of dust appeared on the road. Wade and 4 riders approached the ranch. Their horses stopped only a few yards from the cabin. Wade looked at Sarah with a cold smile. This is your last chance. Sign the ranch over, and we'll leave you in peace. Sarah took a slow breath and stood straight. My answer hasn't changed. You'll regret that. Before Wade could move another step, Daniel quietly walked to Sarah's side. He did not draw his revolver. He simply stood beside her. There doesn't have to be trouble, Daniel said calmly. Ride away. One of Wade's men laughed. Who are you to give orders? Daniel answered with steady eyes. Just a man who's tired of seeing good people threatened. Wade reached for his pistol, hoping fear would force Sarah to surrender. Instead, Daniel's calm voice stopped him. If you draw that gun, every person in Willow Creek will know you came here looking for a fight with a widow. For a long moment, no one moved. Just then, the sound of galloping horses echoed across the prairie. The town sheriff and several ranchers rode through the gate. The blacksmith, the storekeeper, and other neighbors followed behind. One rancher pointed toward Wade. We've heard enough of your bullying. Another added, Sarah has helped every family in this valley. Today, we're helping her. Wade looked around and realized he no longer outnumbered anyone.
Leave now!
With an angry glare, he lowered his hand.
But this isn't over.
This isn't over. It is, the sheriff replied firmly. You'll leave now, and if you return to threaten this ranch again, you'll answer to the law. Wade turned his horse without another word. His riders followed, disappearing into the distant hills. The ranch grew quiet once more. Sarah looked around at her friends, then at Daniel. You never fired a single shot. Daniel smiled. Sometimes courage inspires others to stand beside you. For the first time in years, Sarah believed her home was truly safe. Summer slowly settled across the valley. Wildflowers bloomed beside the fences, children laughed in the streets of Willow Creek, and Sarah's ranch became known as one of the friendliest places on the frontier. Daniel remained, helping repair barns, train horses, and lend a hand wherever it was needed. Though still quiet by nature, he no longer carried the heavy loneliness that had followed him across the West. One evening, the townspeople gathered for a picnic beside the little wooden church. Music floated through the warm air while families shared homemade pies and fresh bread. As the celebration came to an end, Sarah and Daniel walked together toward a hill overlooking the valley. The setting sun painted the sky with shades of gold, orange, and crimson. For a while, they simply admired the peaceful view. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. When you first came here, I thought you were just passing through. So did I, Daniel admitted. What changed? He smiled softly. I found something worth staying for. Sarah looked into his gentle gray eyes. And what was that? You. She felt tears gather in her eyes. You protected my ranch. Daniel shook his head. No. He reached for her hand. You reminded me that a broken heart can heal, and that a man can find a home again. Sarah smiled through happy tears. You already have one. Daniel held her hand gently. I spent years believing I had lost everything. And now? Now I know the trail wasn't leading me away from my life. He looked at her with quiet affection. It was leading me to you. Sarah rested her head against his shoulder as the evening breeze drifted across the prairie.
I never thought I'd
Below
find peace
them,
again.
horses grazed
never had to
peacefully,
face it alone.
smoke curled from
Look at
cabin
everything we've
chimneys,
built.
and the church bell
new
echoed
beginning.
softly through the valley. Months later, friends from Willow Creek gathered once more at that same little church. There was no grand celebration, only smiling neighbors, blooming wildflowers, and two grateful hearts. Sarah and Daniel promised to walk every trail of life together. The lonely widow had found hope again. The nameless gunslinger had found the family he thought he had lost forever. As the sun disappeared beyond the western mountains, they rode home side by side, their horses moving slowly along the dusty trail. Ahead of them waited a warm cabin, peaceful evenings, honest work, and a future built not on fear, but on trust, kindness, and love. And beneath the endless western sky, two once lonely souls discovered that the greatest journey was never across the frontier, it was the journey that led them home to each other. This completes the full 6-scene Wild West romance story with a gentle, family-friendly ending and a slow-burn romance suitable for YouTube narration.